that's the kind of system that needs to be implemented across the board, so that you don't have kids playing the game that you're speaking about, where they're saying, I didn't do them and I bombed it and I'm just going to reassess. We don't want to replace one crutch, which was extra credit, with a new crutch, which is reassessment. We need to implement the full system. We need to do it with fidelity so that we can ensure that students are not only building the learning that they need, but building the confidence that they understand it so that they get it the first time, and reassessment becomes the exception, not the norm. Now, it's not happening that way now. I realize that, but it needs to, and it will once we have uniform expectations and we provide the support with our staff. One of the reasons Mrs. Braille is our assessment coach is so that we have somebody on staff who can work one-on-one with every single member of this building. There will also be an assessment coach next year at the middle school to work with every single staff in that building to ensure that they have the tools, the resources, the knowledge, and the capacity necessary to have fidelity to this system. Because if we do a half you-know-what rollout of anything, it's not going to do anybody any good. And we're committed that if we do this, we're going to do it, and we're going to do it effectively. The gentleman who is the author of most of this research, Professor Black, he's from England. He wrote the groundbreaking research that was Inside the Black Box, came out 2 decades ago. And that's led to many other research papers along the way. He has a new one that was published in the last year that talks about what happens when you implement this and you don't do it right. And that's a paper that we're using as a team right now to make sure that we don't make those mistakes. We know that over the pilot phase, the last couple of years, we've hit some missteps. And we need to make sure that moving forward, we don't have those, that we have fidelity to the system, that we can ensure that each and every student has the instruction and the support and the stick behind them necessary to make sure that they're performing at their highest levels. Okay.
I have a question about, I understand that their GPA, but in each class, they only can get an A, a B, a C, or a D. There's not going to be pluses or minuses.
Correct. Yes.
Then if there's only two...
So their final grade at the end.
Final grade. So if there's only 2 benchmarks, and they get a 3 and a 4 on those benchmarks.
You're pointing out a huge problem. There should never be as few as 2 benchmarks. The concept that you can, over the length of a semester, accurately assess all of the learning targets along the way in 2 benchmarks is ludicrous. And if there's a teacher doing that, don't tell me right now, but tell me afterwards, because we have some problems.
But even if they have 3 or 4, and they have a 2 on one, they didn't retake it, they have a 3 and another a 4, or you know what I mean, where it doesn't come out to an even number. It's
Sure.
not going to. How is that decided what grade they get?
That's a question that
You round up or down?
Dana, Tanya, do you have an answer to that?
Yeah, we had decided that it would be, I believe, a 3.5, I believe we decided it would be a 3.5 to a 4 would be our A range. I just said that wrong because it's a 5 point.
Yeah.
The 4.5 to a 5 would be your A. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's the round up?
Right.
Okay. And again, it's on a much smaller distribution. It's not on the 100-point scale where we needed an ability to distinct between a whole bunch of other pieces of the puzzle.
So you say that, okay, I know class rank is you can go and ask, and that's been that way for years, nothing new. But eventually you say it's going to go away, is that correct?
I think that's a conversation we're engaging in. What I said we want to go away from is weighted grades. And weighted, as we do that, the 2 of them go hand in hand. There's really no purpose for one or the other. Over the next year.
I guess that's right. I feel, I hear you say you want to get away from weighted grades, so I'm hearing, well, you want to go away from class rank too.
If you ask in my professional opinion, is there a purpose for class rank? It motivates the students who are in the top 10, not even the top 10%, the top 10, because there's some high-stakes scholarships for the valedictorian and the salutatorian. For the vast majority of our students, it's not is meaningful, and at the end of the day, it really has little meaning or value at all. So in my opinion, it would be to get rid of it, but what we need to do over the next year is engage this community in that conversation and decide how do we want to select our valedictorian or salutatorian. Do we want to continue to do it on the ranks? Because we could certainly do that. Or do we want to look at these people in a broader sense and what else have they accomplished in their time at Kettle Moraine? So that's a question for the community to decide, not for me to decide.
Well, I guess I hope that you continue it. And, I mean, my son wasn't top 10, but he got a lot of scholarships, and I'm certain his class rank played a big factor, and we couldn't afford to send him to Illinois without those scholarships. We can't afford Boston College. And I'm sure you said, though, those kids got accepted to all those colleges, even though we don't report class rank. Well, I'm quite certain they reported their class rank, and they're very proud of their class rank.
Well, I understand that. We've been keeping...
And I really would like to know, since we're allowed to talk about George, how would George feel if he was no longer number one?
And we talked about that with George last year. So Mrs. K, in fact, had a very intimate conversation with George and his father when we first started moving in that direction, and she was the principal. But what I do want to point out, as we've made the transition to not report rank on transcripts, we have asked guidance to keep track of the number of inquiries they've had for rank, and it was something less than 20 students out of all of the students that we have this year who requested their rank to be able to include it on anything. So I understand that to those 20 it means something, but I just want to keep it in perspective as we have this conversation.
I'm just curious, we hear about the budget crisis and situation that we're in. How does this either positively or negatively impact it? To me, this seems like a lot more work for the teachers. We've got one student that's reassessing and reassessing and reassessing, and so they're going to have to take time away from, your son who got the 5 the first time around, and the teachers are already concerned with their workload, and we're increasing class sizes, and we're cutting opportunities. So how does this fit into that whole situation?
The reassessment takes the place of other work the teachers were already doing. You remember that slide I had with the Band-Aids and the healing. The teachers are already working systems to try and repair the damaged system. They're working on extra credit, which if it's submitted, they've got to go through and read it and score it, etc. They're working through alternative assignments, other things that they've been doing along the way because they're professionals and they know they needed to do something to fix this. So it'll be a shift in their work from that stuff to the process of reassessment. What ultimately is the key to this, to create some efficiencies, to get really, really good at the formative process. If we can get really good on the front end, we're going to start eliminating work on the back end. And that's the key distinction. We've always had homework, we've always been doing this, but if we can get better at ensuring that our formative assessments are accurate, directly tied to the learning targets, and used by the students to gauge their own learning, you're going to see fewer and fewer reassessments, which will then cut down the workload. And you'll see that in some of the research that's out there. But that means we've got to implement it. We've got to implement it fully. It's got to be in every classroom, and we've got to have fidelity to the system. We can't have exceptions in misalignment.
To that fidelity point, you talk about uniformity. To me, whether you're using the rubric or an A through F, to the uniformity, whether you're using a rubric to assess or the A through F, it's in the teacher's DNA to be uniform or not uniform. I mean, truly, we think the rubric. I mean, how does that happen? How does that shift the way that a teacher thinks?
Yep. Great question. How do you get inside a teacher's mind and make sure that there's alignment? The biggest